Hi guys, how you doing? I've decided to make a wee video since we're at the end of week 2 of the August block and there's quite a lot of new guys. So I thought I've not made a video in a while. They've got a spare 15 minutes, so I'm going to try and make a quick one just to summarise some of the things that we've covered in the first 2 weeks in terms of nutrition. So one of the first things that you probably noticed that we asked you to do is to try and forget about weight loss. Okay, so that is not to say that if someone is maybe 3 or 4 stone overweight and they know that they've got to lose weight as such, that is not to say that it's irrelevant and that you don't need to lose weight. I just mean that it should no longer be your primary focus, because for a start, weight loss is the outcome that you're hoping to achieve, whereas what you need to focus on is habits, a change in habits that are going to lead you to that outcome. So focus more on actionable changes and habits that you can do now, and focus on getting them right, as opposed to checking the scales and constantly thinking, I need to lose weight, or the most common sort of desire that folks cite, which is, I want to tone up and lose weight. That's the most common one. Everyone wants to tone up and lose weight, right? So the first thing I wanted to mention that I've mentioned at the seminar was that ultimately it's really fat loss that you need to focus on as opposed to weight loss. You can only lose fat at a certain rate. Okay, so realistically, I would suggest that 1 to 2 pounds a fortnight of body fat, or fat, sorry, yeah, yeah, the same thing, is realistically as much as you're going to lose. If you're losing a lot more weight quicker than that, it's not fat that you're losing, it's going to be a combination of water and muscle mass, and that is undesirable. Okay, because from a body compositional point of view, a body fat percentage point of view, in theory you can lose fat, but also lose muscle. Therefore, your body fat percentage might not actually alter at all, since it's a percentage of your overall mass. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is not to take weekly weigh-ins or check your weigh yourself every day, because it's not going to happen like that if you're doing it right. If you're in a crash diet sort of Weight Watcher style mentality, then you're doing it wrong, basically, because your only focus is going to be on the weighing scales, and that shouldn't be the case. And the reason that shouldn't be the case, as I've just mentioned, is because you can only lose so much fat per week, basically, and any more weight that you're losing above that means that it's not fat you're losing, it's also muscle mass, which is undesirable, particularly in females, because females find it harder to build and retain muscle compared to men, because men have more testosterone, which is the main hormone in muscle building. So, how do you ensure that weight loss is coming primarily from fat loss? Well, the first thing is to not go on a really strict diet and really deplete your intake of food. Just a moderate, just a mild reduction in overall intake if you know that you've got a lot of weight to lose. So that is a good thing, and the good news of that is because any changes you do make aren't going to be too extreme. So we talked about, and we've mentioned it in emails, but maybe you're someone that prefers just listening instead of reading emails. We talked about how to just try and make like gradual small changes over time. So if you're someone that skips breakfast every day, and then as a result tends to get really ravenous around lunchtime and then grabs the first thing they see, then try and recognise that behaviour around lunchtime in terms of being ravenous and grabbing something is probably a result of not eating enough or not eating anything first thing in the morning. So not everyone needs to eat breakfast, so it's not a case of like breakfast is essential. But if you're someone that is really controlling your hunger cravings, and find yourself ravenous as the day goes on, especially towards night time, and you just raid the cupboards, then you need to look at potential interventions that is going to reduce the likelihood of that happening again going forward. And one way would be to potentially introduce a breakfast, preferably a protein-rich breakfast. We spoke about the benefits of protein in terms of the satiating effect of them, of protein-rich foods, so they will fill you up for longer, meaning you'll be less likely to overeat, or at least reduce the amount you eat in the first place. Which is, if you've got a lot of weight to lose, then that's going to be essential. The second thing that we want to consider when it comes to ensuring that the weight loss you achieve is just fat loss is a high protein diet. Okay, so your muscle mass is made up of protein, or amino acids. So in order for you to ensure that any weight loss, or at least help ensure that any weight loss you do achieve is just fat loss and not muscle loss, is to not only keep only a modest reduction in your overall intake, but also to ensure that a higher protein diet intake. So we recommend 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Remember, that's a ballpark figure, it's not essential, it's just to help protect the muscle mass you do have. And the third way is to perform strength training, because when you're trying to, so what we do know from studies and things like that is that weight loss itself, whether it's fat loss or muscle mass, weight loss is primarily derived or controlled by your nutrition. Okay, so that is what we know by fact. From there, we also know though that what makes up your nutrition will determine how much of the weight loss is muscle mass. So for example, if you go on a crash diet, but that crash diet is made up of more so protein, then you'll be probably less likely to lose as much muscle mass as you were if the same crash diet with the same calorie number was very little protein. And the other thing we know though is that if the diets are the same, so if two people have got the same sort of diets, the type of exercise they do will really determine how much of the weight they lose is fat versus muscle. And what we know is that if you are resistance training or training with weights and sprinting, that it's going to be much more likely that the amount of fat loss that is achieved from that weight loss is greater than it would be if the exercise of choice was a lot of high intense cardiovascular exercise like spin cycling and endurance running and things like that. Now that's not to say that those things don't have their place, but at the end of the day, if you've only got 3 hours a week to train, then you need to prioritise and you need to do the things that give you the most bang for your buck, essentially, that tick the most boxes. So strength training in combination with sort of a bit of HIIT training in the way you're doing it at the boot camp sessions and the sprinting will help ensure that you retain and build some muscle tissue, while also creating a bit of an energy deficit. But having said that, the major energy deficit should come from nutrition if that's something you're looking to achieve. Okay, so hopefully these things are making sense. It's about simple changes though. Okay, so if your lunch is usually, I don't know, not a protein rich lunch, just add a bit of protein to it. So if you're someone that's like, I'm not going to give up my sandwich or my 3-decker sandwich that I love to have, at least ensure that 3-decker sandwich or whatever it is also going to have a really decent amount of protein in it, like chicken or something like that, or if you're a vegetarian, then you'll know the combination of foods that make up a full amino acid food. I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about if you're a vegetarian, because you should have done your own research before going vegetarian. So it's just about making small changes. It's not about completely changing your diet altogether. Okay. Obviously, it's about reducing confectionery for a start. The average person, I think, consumes about 25% of their intake comes from confectionery, like pastries and cakes and all that crap. So that has to be reduced, obviously. So reduce that, up the protein intake a wee bit where possible. And the resistance training. All these things combine to ensure that any progress you do make from a weight loss point of view is going to be from fat tissue as opposed to muscle tissue. However, the caveat to that is that as a result, it means that the weight loss you're achieving is higher quality almost, if that makes sense, but it's also slower, much slower. So in other words, the slower your weight loss, the better. Okay, as long as it's sort of gradually going in the right direction, because you're getting into better habits, you're walking about more as well, you're taking more steps, you're generally trying to increase your sort of basic sort of metabolism just by walking about more. So walking is something that you need to really consider looking into if you've not started it yet, because that's a low stress exercise. So when it comes to exercise, you can't do too much intense exercise, like lots of spin classes and things like that, like even lots of boot camp classes. You can't do 6 boot camp classes a week, because what we do know is 2 things. One, it's highly stressful, okay, and is only so much fat you can burn at once. So the bigger the extreme drop, or the bigger the extreme amount of exercise you do, the same way the bigger the extreme reduction in calories you'd make, the more likely it is that you're going to start burning body fat, muscle mass as well as body fat. But sorry, what was I going to say? I forgot my train of thought. That's the problem. I don't know how to pause. Everyone knows how to pause and then re-edit the videos. I don't know how to do it, and that's I just need to keep talking. But the other thing we also know is that the more intense training you do, so if you then sit about less throughout the day. That's something that I've sent studies out about this a few boot camps ago, that 3 HIIT sessions a week, or high intense sessions, is the sort of optimal amount. Because what we've found is that if you start doing like 4 to 5 and 6, then your body sort of compensates by shutting down in other ways to try and offset any of the calorie burn that you're trying to achieve by doing extra. So it really doesn't pay to do lots and lots of training, to be honest. 3 to 4 high quality workouts a week is enough. Okay, and we also spoke at the seminar about the whole adaptive thermogenesis thing. So the quicker you lose weight, your body responds by dropping its basic metabolic rate, meaning that although you've lost weight, your metabolism slowed down. So that if you're wanting to now maintain that new weight, the only way you're going to achieve that is by sticking to your new regime. So as soon as you start to falter and go back to your old regime, you'll start to put the weight back on. But what we also know and what we also discussed was that not only will you put the weight back on, but your metabolism doesn't set back to what it was before. It slows down to your new weight, and then if you start to eat again the way you did before, you'll put the weight back on. And the chances are you'll actually put more weight on again because it doesn't go back to your old faster metabolism, if that makes sense. So in other words, it doesn't pay at all to yo-yo diet because yo-yo dieting makes it harder and harder and harder to lose weight or fat long term because your basic metabolic rate and the amount of energy you need becomes very unpredictable and tends to drop and drop and drop. Okay, so remember that overall weight will dictate how much energy you actually require, which is why it's also beneficial to try and actually, to some degree, offset weight loss by gaining some muscle. And that's the thing to consider. So if you lose £7 of £7 of fat and you put on £4 of muscle, there's only a £3. Is that right? £3? I forgot the numbers I used. There's only a £3 difference in terms of your weight. So if you jump in the scales, you'll be quite disappointed by that. However, losing £7 of muscle and putting on 2 or 3 or 4 pounds of muscle, losing £7 of fat and putting 2 or 3 or 4 pounds of muscle mass on will make a dramatic difference to your physique. It will look completely different. So this is why we train you the way we do, and this is why missing a sort of resistance-based training session and then try to replace it with going a long distance run isn't the same thing, because if you're thinking it is, it's because you're basing everything on energy output. You're just thinking about, oh, we'll burn it off. It's not always about burning things off. It's about building things. It's about building muscle tissue, and that is what is the most beneficial approach, or the most sustainable way and most effortless way long term to maintain fat loss and keep it off long term. Okay, so for that reason, try and forget about the scale. That's why for years we've been saying ditch the scales. It's not that being overweight means you don't need to lose weight. It just means that it shouldn't be your primary focus. And in time, your body will respond to your new, better habits, walking more, eating a higher protein-rich diet, getting a better balance, that kind of thing. Also briefly mentioned in an email that there's a good number, maybe 40%, I reckon, of not just returners but new guys who shouldn't be focusing on fat loss at all. There's too much focus on fat loss. It's fat loss this, fat loss that. I want to lose this, I want to lose that. A lot of you should be focusing on gaining muscle and strength. Okay, so you shouldn't be thinking in that fat loss mindset at all, because if you gain a bit of muscle and strength, guess what happens? Your body fat or your body composition improves. So your body fat percentage will drop anyway, because your overall mass may have gone up. But that's because you've added some muscle tissue, which means your fat tissue that's still there is a smaller percentage of your overall mass. So these are things you need to consider. It's not as simple as just weight loss, and this is why I just can't be bothered with the scales. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're not a good marker in certain respects. They are, but the closer and closer you are to being smaller or leaner, the less and less relevant they become. Okay, so that covers quite a wide demographic. Don't get me wrong, I know that it doesn't cover quite a wide demographic. Okay, and that's what I mean. So it's maybe 40 to 50% really will benefit from losing weight, which will come in time if they take their time, if they do it slowly. But another good 40 to 50%, weight loss is not the issue at all. Okay, so if you're unsure about this raises more questions than answers. There's only one way to get the message, and that is for you to come and talk to me, or email me and ask me that you want to talk to me. I can talk to you after a class. I can take a few Wednesdays to not work and just come and talk, or even Monday and Tuesday, whatever. I don't know. So anyway, that's just some quick summarised points I just wanted to make for the new guys, but maybe to reinforce it for other people. Any questions in the back of this, please just ask.